What's up, my fellow YouTubers? So, how is everybody doing on their weekend? I am doing great. So, today I figured I would talk about how to get your book published on Amazon, or at least how I did it. And I went through BookBaby and I paid them about $1,600, which probably was too much because the original story was over 300 pages long, and by the time they um, put it on the template or whatever, for every 3 pages that I did was 1 page in the book. Yeah, I literally counted the letters from like a Stephen King book that was about 300 pages, and it's about the same page length, which is weird. So like when they formatted it, that's the word I'm looking for. For whatever reason, they made it shorter. So the finished result is only like 130 pages long, which is disappointing. Like I feel like then maybe I should have just wrote more in it. I basically wanted to get my foot in the door, and I wouldn't say rushed it. The idea was there since 1995. It was about a serial killer that gets trapped in a purgatory world with a second chance for redemption, and it's it blends in fantasy, horror, a little bit of everything, and but it's not like the literal afterlife. It's not like the literal heaven and hell. It's more like a purgatory. Yet struggling with the afterlife was just like it caught me as a good title for it. The problem is now when you look up struggling with the afterlife, you get it intertwined with like Christian novels or talking about the literal afterlife, where it's more of a book of fiction, and I picture it in my head like a movie, and there's so many different scenarios that I pictured in it, but overall, the atmosphere is the same. It's almost like a Dead by Daylight atmosphere where you don't know what's coming, but you know something's coming after you, and you don't know what you're gonna see. It's almost kind of like an Elden Ring type of atmosphere where you could be walking and all of a sudden some giant thing comes out at you and like, oh my god, what do I do? Type of thing, or it could be something as small as a little creature. Well, you got to read it for yourself, but basically, the funny thing about it is, it's like giant killer toilets, that breathe, and each of them have different personalities, right? They're like there's giant stalls, and each one of them, some of them are quote unquote friendly, some of them aren't. And different walks of life from different time zones end up there. So in that way, it was kind of like Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, where different people from different time zones go through the quote unquote door. Only instead of going through a door in this series, because it's kind of like a series, they die and they remember how they died and they remember who they were in their past life. But it's kind of like now you kind of get a second chance, but the rules have changed in that world. And I've taken different characters and I put them in different scenarios within stories. I've actually wrote them on MySpace back in the early 2000s when it was bigger. And I actually got one of my stories, quote unquote, published, but it was like the one, quote unquote, more novel one. It was vampires, and it was one of my least favorites, but I guess Cemetery Dance liked it. They said, okay, we're going to publish it. I made no money. I just wanted my name out there. And I've always liked to write as a kid, all the way up back into the 4th grade. And what would happen was, like, my stepfather, he reminded me of the stepfather in, like, the Twisted Sister video, I Want to Rock, what do you want to do with it? Like, he didn't like MTV. He didn't like me watching horror movies, this and that. So when I went over my father's house, because when my mother and father divorced, I would go over his house. He would let me watch horror movies. And I would watch, like, Oh my God, I would brag about like I was only 8 years old when I was watching Faces of Death, and I was like, yeah, look at this, you know, and The Gates of Hell, and I just like remember being like taking. There was a movie called Pieces, like it was brutal. But when I was younger, when I was a kid, I liked it more than I do now. Now I'm more into action movies and stuff like that. But I remember taking Pieces over to my cousin's house. My cousin lived down the street, and we were watching it together and blending in with the Wizard of Oz and all the other shit that you watch as a kid. But it shaped my thinking on how to write, and I've always been good at writing the macabre. Not just it's not really horror; it's blending in a bunch of story, good versus evil. Because then later on, when you read the Bible and you understand life and death, heaven and hell, like purgatory, whatever, the other side, I guess you'd call it, and I just took that and made my own imagination and twist to it, and made my own characters, my own world, and the result is like something that I'll get away from it for ages, and it will come back to me like, hey, you got to write more. Lately, it's been working on YouTube, maybe streaming on Twitch again. Like I lost interest in writing because I get distracted with other things that I like to do. But one thing's for sure, when I wake up, I love going into Premiere Pro and editing videos. So I feel like that's more of my calling in life, but I've always been good at the macabre. I just think that being a teenager in a conservative town, having long hair, having a pet snake, wearing metal shirts like Suicidal Tendencies, and openly saying, hey, I like to write horror stories, got me labeled as a Satanist, which I'm not. Back in the Satanic Panic era, look, I accepted Christ in my heart. I'm not ashamed of Jesus Christ, but I'm not saying I'm the perfect example of what a Christian should be. It's just, what do you do when you have this talent that nobody fucking understands, and everybody labels you as something that you're not, and threatens you? Holy fuck, if this happens, you're going to hell. Okay, but it's okay for them to fucking spread their legs and fucking cheat on their husband or whatever the fuck they do after that, and then they're not even fucking there for you. They never fucking call for you. They never fucking, they're never there for you later on in your life. Whereas the opportunity to be a famous writer is right there for you if you choose to be so. I feel like only God can judge whether you go to heaven or hell, not some self-righteous asshole that just labels you as something that you're not. That's just the way I feel. But when you're part of a conservative town and you're dealing with that every fucking day, all the time, it impacts you. Like, especially later on in life, you actually think about those people and you're like, yeah, I bet you they wouldn't be happy with me now. At the same time, I'm not a famous writer. Look, my shit is on Amazon for $3. I think I might have cashed out once or twice. And with BookBaby, what I went through was BookBaby, and the way that they work is you pay for advertising. Let's say you pay $100 for advertising. You won't know until 3 months later on if you actually made money or not. So I don't bother advertising. I'm like, why spend money on shit when I don't even know if I'm going to make it in return until 3 months later? That doesn't make sense. And that's the one thing about BookBaby that I fucking hate. And the other thing is, I think you have to pay extra for hard copies. And I said, screw it. I'm only going for, for the digital, because most people, I mean, I know I do. I just pick digital from now on. I don't even pick physical books. So how to get your book actually published on Amazon? There's different ways of doing it. For me, and for other writers that I've talked to, it actually costs you money. It's not like you wrote a book and somebody pays you. Like every Stephen King book that I read, or that I've read, like the Stephen King Companion, he's talked about, like, you find a publisher, or somebody sells their book for a down payment of $250,000. That wasn't my case, and that wasn't other writers' cases that I've come across. Like smaller writers, every writer that I've talked to, you pay for it, and then you hope that the right person sees it and likes it. My book is so bizarre, I don't even know if it'll ever get accepted in any community because it's so bizarre. Even Cemetery Dances, read some of my earlier stuff, I said, "Whoa, this is weird." But weird is it's different. Nobody else is writing quite like it. But how you do it is you approach BookBaby, or there's actually a thing that you go through where you're like, okay, this is my book. I'm going to publish it, and they actually, it's just like Amazon, like, okay, this is your order. This is how much you got to pay. And it's not just done there. You go back and forth with the publisher. Okay, this needs editing. You should do this first. And then, hey, do you want somebody to make a cover for you, or do you want to make your own? And I think they did a good job. It looks like Pee Wee Herman's fucking Playhouse. It wasn't exactly how I pictured it. And the original artwork they said was too much, like too much to do, like my idea. And what it was like somebody sitting in one of the quilted furnitures with the teardrops on it and a hand coming out and grabbing them and like trying to pull them in. This is more corny and fuck it. Like when you see it, you're like laughing. And I'm like, fuck it. You know what? It's still looks like Resident Evil and Pee Wee's Playhouse had a kid, right? And like I said, I went through a bankruptcy and shit like that. So one book is probably all I'll be able to publish for a while. And in the future, if I ever get more financially secure, who knows, I might do more. But I think my bread and butter, or my passion, or what makes me happy is editing, whether it be video games or doing blogs or doing something, editing in Premiere Pro. That's just what I like to do. But this is something that I've always wanted, like just to have a book out and say, hey, look at this, my book. So to get your book published on Amazon, at least for me, I went through BookBaby. But I'd like to hear like what you did to get published, or what book you have. And let me know how it went. And hopefully everyone's successful, and because that's, this pursuit of happiness, I guess that's what we all want, right? We all want success. We all want not so much money that we're going to be total fucking assholes, or maybe we would be total fucking assholes if we made too much money. I've seen it happen to people, but I'd like to think that I would be like the Keanu Reeves of happy, where even if I made like billions of dollars, I'd still blend in with the homeless people and talk to everybody. Either way, money isn't everything, but it can get you to go where you want to go in life, right? Instead of where you are. But I don't know. Let me know what you think, if you're a writer, if you're trying to get published, and what you did. Did somebody find you and pay you, or did you have to go through like BookBaby or another publishing thing and pay them and hope that the advertising and somebody would find it and get big? All right, let me know in the comments. Peace out, my fellow YouTubers.